Think you know about helicopter crashes? Stick around for the real truth. By now, you may have wondered how safe it is to fly. Maybe accidents in the news have made you a little nervous about the safety of helicopters. If you choose to ride in one of these wonders of modern engineering, are you tempting violent death? Brave or foolish? Drop your opinion in a comment. Relatively speaking, helicopters are definitely less safe than flying in commercial airplanes. In some years, the accident rate for commercial airplanes is zero. But in 2018, helicopters had an accident rate of 0.72 per 100,000 flight hours, totaling 121 accidents for that entire year. The airline industry wouldn't be able to stay in business if planes crashed with the frequency helicopters do. Can you imagine if United Airlines had 121 planes go down in a single year? Nobody would get on one of their planes willingly if those were the odds. And most of the accidents happen with private helicopter flights. For whatever reason, military pilots seem to hit the ground less than their commercial counterparts. Now, the odds are still much higher of dying in an automobile-related accident than meeting a violent end while flying, commercial or otherwise. But that's a small comfort for widows and orphans left behind by those who have died in helicopter crashes. Surprisingly, deaths in helicopter-related mishaps are often not because of technology failure. As a member of the Bad Things family, you can guess that the main contributing factor is usually human error. So how long have people been crashing helicopters? The first fully functional helicopter was flown in 1936. It was the Focke-Wulf FW-61 and was designed and built by Henrik Focke. It didn't look like modern helicopters as it had two rotors attached to outriggers. It looked more like an airplane with rotors instead of wings, essentially. Very few were ever produced, but it did spawn the development of the helicopters we recognize today. Despite the technological achievement, most of the theory behind the new flying vehicle had been known for at least about 2,400 years. The concept of how a helicopter might work was known at least as far back as 400 BC in China, and possibly long before that. Children played with a toy called a Chinese top. This toy has a rotor on top and is powered by a spring of some kind, like a rubber band. Kids would wind it up and then let it fly when the energy was released. This toy made its way to Europe and also appeared in drawings by Leonardo da Vinci. We're not sure how that might have influenced developments in Europe, but da Vinci did design a machine with a rotor which resembled a helicopter in many respects. It was human-powered and required 4 people to power it. The people were supposed to turn the rotor device using a rope. Modern engineers are fairly certain this device never left the ground if it was even built. Clearly, people have known how flight works for thousands of years. So why did it take until the 1930s to develop a functional helicopter? The main reason is because human exertion alone just isn't enough to power flying vehicles. Toys can overcome this restriction because they weigh almost nothing, but a powerful engine is required to lift humans or other heavy objects off the ground. Having people power a helicopter by pulling ropes, as Da Vinci imagined, isn't enough to create lift. Only 20th century innovation would result in the development of engines capable of the accomplishment. An additional engineering challenge had to do with the rotors themselves. If they are not arranged perfectly, then the forces created by them spinning could tear the aircraft apart or make it impossible to control. So once suitably powerful engines were available, it took time to discover which rotor arrangements worked. But the modern helicopter is definitely a modern marvel of technological development. Unlike most airplanes, it can take off and land vertically, and helicopters can hover as well. Because of this, they have been used to rescue people trapped in hard-to-reach places, help police departments find criminals, and for air ambulances to help injured or sick people reach life-saving treatment in time. For the wealthy among us, they also serve as a method of transportation to avoid traffic or other delays. You might think that helicopters crash more often than airplanes because if the rotors stop, then the helicopter would crash, whereas an airplane can glide if this happens. But this would be a false assumption. A helicopter can use a technique known as autorotation. If the engine stops, then air moving over the rotors can keep them moving enough for the pilot to glide to the ground safely. The longest autorotation in history was performed by Jean Boulet in 1972. He managed to reach an altitude of 40,814 feet, which is still the high altitude record for a helicopter. The low temperatures caused the engine to die and it couldn't be restarted. He used autorotation to land the aircraft safely. Clearly, if conditions are favorable and the pilot is skilled, even an engine failure can't cause a helicopter to crash. But crash they do. The worst helicopter accident in the United States in terms of lives lost was when an airplane collided with a helicopter over the Grand Canyon on June 18, 1986. All 25 passengers and crew in both aircraft were killed as a result. At 8:55 that morning, a Twin Otter airplane took off for a sightseeing flight over the Grand Canyon. At 9:13 a.m., the Bell 206 helicopter then took off for a similar sightseeing tour. The two aircraft apparently did not see each other and collided at 6,500 feet. The main rotor of the helicopter struck the nose, landing gear, and tail of the airplane. The rotor of the helicopter disintegrated and the tail of the Twin Otter fell off. Nobody knows for certain why this happened, as there was no flight recorder data. It was assumed that the limited number of scenic points over the Grand Canyon contributed to congestion, and so an accident like this was unavoidable. Changes were made to better control air traffic in the area after the accident. Another very notable helicopter accident happened during filming of the Twilight Zone movie on July 23, 1982. The film's director, John Landis, was trying to film the last section of the movie, which was trying to show a Vietnam veteran who traveled back in time to save two young Vietnamese children. The veteran was played by actor Vic Morrow. In one scene, Vic Morrow was carrying two children through a village, trying to escape as explosions were going off all around him. Two child actors, aged 6 and 7, shared the scene with Morrow. Unfortunately, pyrotechnic explosions damaged the rotors of the helicopter. The pilot lost control and crashed while Morrow and the children were crossing a small pond. The rotors of the helicopter decapitated Morrow and one child. The struts of the aircraft crushed the other child to death. The children were being used in violation of California labor laws, as a subsequent investigation and manslaughter trial discovered. The event did not result in jail time for the film's director, but it certainly resulted in many changes in the film industry. It also destroyed the previously warm relationship between John Landis and Steven Spielberg, who was a producer and co-director of the film. There are certainly many more helicopter-related disasters, but the most recent one which has gathered attention is the recent mishap that killed Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and other passengers. On January 26, 2020, at 9:06 a.m., Bryant's helicopter departed from John Wayne Airport. The chopper had 8 other passengers, including his 13-year-old daughter and 2 other 13-year-old girls. Bryant frequently used a helicopter to avoid Los Angeles traffic, so this was not unusual activity for him. Fog was heavy that day, but supposedly visibility was sufficient to allow helicopters to fly. Unfortunately, the pilot apparently had some problems. Presumably, he didn't realize how close to the ground he was and crashed into a hill at 186 miles per hour. There were no survivors. The main reason for helicopter crashes then appears to be human error. Sometimes pilots simply can't see the danger and fail to avoid it. In some cases, pilots are placed into dangerous situations through no fault of their own. And in other cases, it's just bad luck. But rarely does an equipment failure seem to be at fault. At this point, you might be asking whether you should avoid flying in helicopters. Most people who fly in them never experience an accident. But there doesn't seem to be a good way to predict when they might happen. The Grand Canyon sightseeing tour happened many times without incident, until it didn't. Directors used helicopters for movies all the time, and it wasn't an issue, until people died. And Kobe Bryant traveled by helicopter almost daily without issue, until the day of his fatal crash. The real lesson would seem to be that life is full of risky decisions, and it's hard to know what the correct choices are until after the fact. Ultimately, only you can determine how much convenience outweighs potential risk. Would you still fly in a helicopter? I would personally, but I'm a computer generated avatar trapped in the electronic dungeon of a team of history obsessed sociopaths. Send help. And thanks for watching Bad Things in History.